Tonight, I drove my husband to the airport. I thought it was just another routine business trip, but as I was about to leave, my 7-year-old son suddenly grabbed my hand tightly. His fingers trembled as he whispered, "Mom, don't go home. This morning I heard Dad planning something about us. Please, this time, believe me." I trusted him, and what I witnessed while hiding and watching our house changed everything. Before we get into the story, don't forget to say hi in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. And make sure to hit the subscribe button on the Stories with Meaning channel so you won't miss our next powerful story. The bright lights of the departure terminal at Chicago O'Hare International Airport stung Helena's eyes. The cold air from the air conditioning clashed with the warmth of Victor's embrace. Beside them stood Lucas, their 7-year-old son. He was unusually quiet, gripping the strap of his dinosaur backpack with both hands. Helena hugged Victor back, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne. As always, Victor looked flawless. His blue dress shirt was perfectly pressed, his hair neatly styled, his smile calm and reassuring. To anyone watching, he was the image of a successful husband and father. "This business trip is really important, honey," Victor said in his deep, confident voice. He released Helena and knelt in front of Lucas. "Lucas, take good care of Mom while I'm gone. I'll only be away for a few days." Victor gently patted Lucas's head. Lucas didn't smile. He simply nodded once, his eyes locked onto his father's face. Helena assumed it was just Lucas being his usual quiet self. He was never very expressive, more observant than talkative. Victor didn't seem bothered. He chuckled softly, kissed Lucas on the forehead, then stood up. "They'll be calling my flight soon. I'll go now." He kissed Helena's forehead, looking at her tenderly. "I'll call as soon as I land. Drive safely. Go straight home and rest. I love you both." Helena nodded. "Be careful. Let us know when you arrive." Victor smiled one last time, that charming smile that always melted her heart, then turned and walked toward security, pulling his carry-on behind him. Helena and Lucas stood still, watching his figure disappear behind the glass doors. When Victor was gone, silence settled between them. The airport announcements and the echo of footsteps on the marble floor grew louder again. Helena let out a long breath. She always felt empty when Victor traveled, even though she knew it was part of his job. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go home," she said, taking Lucas's cold hand. Lucas followed without a word. They walked through the long corridor toward the parking garage. Trying to break the silence, Helena said softly, "When we get home, I'll make you some warm chocolate milk." Lucas only murmured something unclear. Helena assumed he was just tired. The parking garage was dim and stuffy, with only a few cars scattered across the level. She pressed the key fob. The car lights blinked. Helena walked to the driver's side while Lucas went to the back door. Just as Helena reached for the handle, she felt a sudden, strong tug on her wrist. She turned sharply. Lucas stood frozen, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. His small nails dug into her skin. Under the faint barrage lights, his face was deathly pale. His eyes were wide, filled with a kind of fear Helena had never seen before. "Lucas, what's wrong?" she asked, crouching down to his level. "Did you see something?" He shook his head quickly, swallowing hard. His lips trembled. He leaned close and whispered into her ear, his voice barely audible. "Mom, don't go home." Helena frowned, confused. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Of course we're going home. It's late." Lucas shook his head again, harder this time. His grip tightened. "No, please don't. This morning I heard Dad." Helena's confusion turned to unease. "He was on the phone in his office. I wasn't trying to listen. I just heard him." "What did you hear?" she asked softly. Lucas took a bright breath, gathering courage. "He was planning something about us, about you and me. He said, 'Make sure it's done after they're asleep.'" Tears filled Lucas's eyes. "I don't understand it, Mom, but his voice, it wasn't like Dad. It was scary." He looked at her desperately. "Please, this time, believe me." The words hit Helena like a hammer. She remembered weeks ago when Lucas said a strange man was watching their house from a car. She had brushed it off as imagination. She remembered when Lucas said he didn't like one of Victor's new business associates. She told him to be polite. Her mind raced. On one side was logic. Victor was her husband, the man who had just kissed her and said he loved them. He was already on a plane to another city. On the other side were Lucas's eyes. That wasn't imagination. That was pure terror. Lucas wasn't a child who lied for attention, and if there was even the smallest chance he was right, Helena swallowed hard and nodded. "Okay, sweetheart," she whispered, wiping his tears. "I believe you." She didn't know what Victor was planning. She only knew one thing. Tonight we were not going home.
Lucas whispered softly, his voice hoarse. Maybe you're wrong, Mom. Maybe we should go home. It's warmer there." He didn't turn his head. His eyes stayed locked straight ahead. "Wait, Mom," he said quietly, his voice tense. There was a certainty in Lucas's tone that made Helena fall silent again. She decided to wait 15 more minutes. Exactly at 10 p.m., the time Helena estimated Victor's plane should have landed, a beam of headlights appeared from around the bend. Helena's heart stopped. Instinctively, she ducked down, pulling Lucas's head with her, even though he was seated far behind. "Don't move, sweetheart," she whispered through the narrow space between the dashboard and the window. Helena peeked out. A vehicle turned into the entrance of their suburban neighborhood. It wasn't a sedan like their neighbors drove. It was a van. A dark-colored van with no logo, no writing on its sides. The windows were heavily tinted. The van moved slowly, not like a guest in a hurry, but like a predator stalking its prey. It continued down the main road of the neighborhood, then turned onto the street where their house stood. Helena held her breath. The van slowed, then stopped directly in front of their home. House number 17. Helena's stomach twisted painfully. What kind of coincidence was this? Maybe it was a repair crew Victor had scheduled. But at 10 o'clock at night, in an unmarked van? A chill crawled up Helena's spine. The van's front doors opened. 2 men stepped out. They wore dark clothes, jackets and caps pulled low, their faces partially hidden under the dim streetlights. They looked ordinary. They weren't carrying visible weapons, which somehow made it even more terrifying. The 2 men paused at the gate, scanning left and right. The street was completely empty. Most of the neighbors were already asleep. Helena expected them to climb the fence or force the door. A burglary. She could call the police. But what happened next froze her blood in her veins. One of the men reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a crowbar or lock-picking tools. He pulled out a key, a gate key. He inserted it into the lock. A soft click echoed in the night. The gate opened smoothly without a sound. "No," Helena whispered, clamping her hand over her mouth to suppress a scream. They had a key. The men walked into the yard, then up to the front door. Once again, the same man pulled out another key, their front door key. He unlocked it as easily as Helena did every day. The door opened, both men stepped inside and closed it behind them, as if they owned the house. Helena's body shook violently. This wasn't a burglary. Burglars didn't have duplicate keys. Only 2 people had copies of their house keys, herself and Victor, her husband who was supposed to be hundreds of miles away, Victor who had given them the keys. "Mom, they're inside," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling uncontrollably. Dad sent them. I was right, wasn't I?" Helena couldn't answer. Her tongue felt numb as reality crashed down on her with full force. Lucas was right. This was real. Her husband had planned this. But why? What did they want inside the house? Helena wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop the shaking. The men didn't turn on the main lights. From where Helena hid, she could see thin beams of flashlight light dancing behind the living room curtains. They moved calmly, methodically. They knew exactly what they were doing. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. Helena sat frozen. What should she do? Call the police? What would she say? There are people in my house, but they used keys that my husband probably gave them? The police would assume it was a domestic dispute. They would come, the intruders might flee, or worse, they would already have a story prepared by Victor. And Victor would know Helena and Lucas were alive. He would know his plan had failed. What would he do next? Helena felt trapped. Then a faint smell drifted into the car through the vents. Sharp, chemical, like gasoline. Helena stared at Lucas in horror. He smelled it too. "Mom, what's that smell?" Lucas whispered. Helena didn't answer. Her eyes locked onto Lucas's bedroom window on the 2nd floor. Suddenly, a flash of light burst from inside. Not a flashlight, a brighter glow. Orange, red, then another flare from the living room window. A small flicker that quickly grew. The white curtains turned into a terrifying orange glow. "They're burning our house!" Lucas cried, his voice breaking. Helena gasped, her body shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't a robbery. This wasn't a warning. This was an execution. Victor didn't just want them out of the house. He wanted them dead, burned alive in their sleep. The business trip, the warm hug, the kiss at the airport, all of it was an alibi, a perfect one. At that moment, Helena's phone vibrated in her pocket. With trembling hands, she pulled it out. A message from Victor. Her heart felt like it was being crushed. She opened it. "Just landed. Hope you're both sleeping peacefully, sweetheart. I love you." Helena clamped her mouth over her mouth. A wave of nausea surged up her throat. She flung the car door open and vomited onto the cold asphalt. Acid burned her mouth as she retched violently, leaning against the open door. Her entire body shook, not from the cold, but from the shock tearing through her consciousness. In front of her, her home, the place where she raised Lucas, where every memory lived, was being consumed by fire.
Thick black smoke rose into the night sky, carrying the stench of gasoline and burning belongings. Lucas's bedroom window on the second floor shattered outward, flames licking the exterior walls. It was hell made real. "Mom! Mom!" Lucas cried from inside the car. Helena snapped back. Lucas was pressed against the rear window, his small face soaked with tears, eyes wide with terror as he watched their home burn. Helena wiped her mouth with her sleeve. She had to be strong. She had to get Lucas away. She forced her jelly-like legs to move, closed the car door, and climbed back into the driver's seat. Her hands shook so badly she barely gripped the steering wheel. She looked at the burning house one last time. Inside were photos of Lucas as a baby, her late mother's shawl, the remnants of her life, all turning to ash. Then, in the distance, sirens began to wail, growing louder. Someone had seen the fire and called the Chicago Fire Department. A new wave of panic hit Helena. She looked back toward the house. The front door flew open. The two men in dark clothing ran out. Their faces were unclear in the chaos. They didn't look panicked, just fast. They jumped back into the dark van waiting nearby. Without turning on its headlights, the van sped through the neighborhood, turned the corner, and vanished, seconds before the first fire truck arrived at the neighborhood gate. They escaped. Helena knew instantly she couldn't go there. She couldn't run to the firefighters screaming that her husband had tried to kill her. Who would believe her? Victor was a respected businessman, a community board member, a generous man who donated regularly to neighborhood causes. Helena, on the other hand, would look like a hysterical woman broken by trauma. And her witness, a 7-year-old boy who had just watched his home burn. Lucas's story about whispers at the airport would be dismissed as a child's imagination, a trauma response.
Victor had planned everything perfectly. His alibi was airtight. Flight records would prove he was hundreds of miles away. The text messages he sent would serve as evidence of his love, the final words of a husband who supposedly knew nothing about the tragedy that would erase his family. If Helena and Lucas appeared now, Victor would act shocked. Of course he would. Then he would twist the story. He would accuse Helena. Maybe Helena was unstable. Maybe she had been under extreme stress. Maybe she had set the house on fire herself in a failed suicide attempt and tried to take Lucas with her. Victor, the patient and grieving husband, would tell the police how emotionally fragile his wife had been lately, and everyone would believe him. Helena's phone vibrated again. She looked down. No new message, just the screen lighting up, displaying Victor's last text. "Hope you're both sleeping peacefully." The words now felt like a blade of ice slicing through her chest. He didn't just want them dead. He wanted them to die in their sleep, without resistance, without awareness, without fear. He wanted them to disappear quietly. "I love you." The lie was cold, calculated. The man she had loved, the man she had been married to for 9 years, was a cold-blooded monster. There was no doubt left in Helena's mind. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was attempted murder. She had to leave, now. Helena inserted the key and started the engine. The car hummed softly. She couldn't go to friends. All of their friends were Victor's friends, too. She couldn't go to family. Her parents were long gone, and distant relatives wouldn't be able to protect her. Victor would play the role of the frantic husband, searching desperately for his missing wife and child after the fire. He would spread their photos everywhere, asking for help. Everyone would unknowingly become his eyes. Helena and Lucas would become fugitives, hunted by the very man who was supposed to protect them. Her thoughts raced. She needed someone Victor didn't know, someone outside their social circle, someone smart, strong and trustworthy. Her mind drifted back to the day of her father's funeral. She remembered standing in his study as he pointed to a stack of legal documents. Helena, her father, Adrian Hart, had said calmly, "Life is complicated. If one day you find yourself in serious trouble you can't tell anyone, not even your husband, you go to this person." He had written a name and a phone number on a thick card. Mrs. Sylvia Hart. "My lawyer," he said. "She's wise, and she knows how to keep secrets." Helena had kept that card in her desk drawer. The drawer was probably ashes now, but she remembered the name, Mrs. Sylvia Hart. She also vaguely remembered the location of her office in Old Town, Chicago. It was her only hope. Helena turned the wheel, driving away from the dead-end street, taking a long route away from the suburban neighborhood, away from the growing chorus of sirens. She glanced at Lucas through the rearview mirror. Her son was curled up in the back seat, buckled in, no longer crying. He stared straight ahead. His face was pale, but steady. He had saved their lives. Helena drove through the night. She had nothing. Her wallet, her ID, her cash, all of it was in her handbag left in the burning living room. All she had was her phone, the car, the clothes she wore beneath her thin jacket, and her son. She kept checking the rearview mirror. Every car behind her made her heart race, especially if it was a dark van. She felt like prey. She didn't know what awaited her at Mrs. Hart's office. She didn't even know if the old woman was still alive. But she had no other choice. She had to keep moving, away from the shadow of the man she once called her husband. The car finally stopped in front of an old two-story commercial building in a quiet part of Old Town. The dashboard clock read 1 a.m. Most of the streetlights were off. The paint on the building was peeling, and the sign above the door read Hart and Associates Law Office. The letters were faded, barely readable. The place looked abandoned. Doubt crept in again. Was this the wrong address? Was the woman even still alive? Helena turned the engine off. Darkness and silence closed in. Lucas had fallen asleep in the back seat, his breathing steady. Exhaustion had finally claimed him. Helena checked her phone. Battery, 15%. She searched quickly online and found Mrs. Hart's office number. She called. Busy tone. Of course, the office was closed. Helena slumped forward against the steering wheel. Tears of frustration welled up. What now? Sleep in the car? Suddenly, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Helena hesitated, terrified it might be Victor, but she had no choice. She answered. "Hello?" An elderly woman's voice came through, raspy but firm. "You've called my office 3 times in a row at 1 in the morning. I assume this is not about tax consultation." Helena's heart leapt. "This is Helena," she said quickly, "Adrian Hart's daughter." A pause. "Yes," the woman replied. "Go on." I'm outside your office. I need help." "Do not speak on the phone," Mrs. Hart cut in sharply. 50 meters ahead of you, there's a narrow alley next to a grocery store. Go into the alley. There's a green wooden door on the left. Knock 3 times. Quickly." The call ended. Without hesitation, Helena started the engine and drove into the narrow alley. There it was. A dull green door. She parked in a hidden spot and gently woke Lucas. "Lucas, sweetheart, wake up. We're here." Lucas blinked, confused. Helena lifted him into her arms and walked to the door. She knocked 3 times, softly. The door opened almost silently. An elderly woman stood in the doorway, late 60s perhaps. Her white hair was tied into a simple bun. She was not wearing a shawl, but her clothing was modest, a long-sleeved blouse and a long skirt. Her eyes were sharp, scanning Helena and Lucas from top to bottom. It was Mrs. Sylvia Hart. "Inside," she said curtly. Helena stepped into what turned out to be a small apartment behind the office. The place was tidy, filled with books and files. It smelled of old paper and jasmine tea. Mrs. Hart locked the door behind them, engaging 3 separate locks.
"Sit," she said. "I'll make tea." It sounded more like an order than an offer. Helena sat on the stiff couch. Lucas sat beside her, clutching her arm tightly. Mrs. Hart returned with a tray holding 3 cups of warm tea and a plate of biscuits. She handed 1 cup to Helena and 1 to Lucas. "Drink first," she said. "Then tell me everything, from the beginning. Do not leave out a single detail." And Helena told her everything. Victor's business trip, Lucas's whisper at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, her decision not to go home, the dark van, the duplicate keys, the fire. She told her about Victor's text message, the perfect alibi. Throughout it all, Mrs. Hart listened silently. Her face remained calm, showing no shock, only occasional nods as if confirming suspicions she already had. Lucas, now calmer, added something crucial. "Dad said on the phone," Lucas spoke softly but clearly, "make sure you take the documents from the steel safe after the fire starts." Mrs. Hart's eyes sharpened. "Steel safe," she murmured. When Helena finished, silence filled the room. Finally, Mrs. Hart set her cup down. "I was afraid this day would come," she said quietly. "Since your father passed, I've been watching Victor. I never trusted him, and now I know I was right." "What do you mean?" Helena asked, her voice trembling. "Victor is after your father's inheritance." Helena frowned in confusion. "Inheritance? My father only left us the house, which is gone now, and an education fund for Lucas. We're still paying off the car. Victor always said his business was struggling." Mrs. Hart gave a thin, bitter smile. "That's what Victor knows," she said. "That's what your father wanted everyone to believe." She stood and retrieved a thick folder from a locked filing cabinet. "Helena," she continued, "your father was a very wealthy man, but he despised laziness and greed. He saw those traits in Victor from the very beginning." Mrs. Hart placed the heavy folder on the table.
Adrian Hart had made 2 wills. The first one, known to Victor, was bait. The second, the real one, was hidden somewhere safe. Mrs. Sylvia Hart opened the folder. "Your father placed all his primary assets, properties across several cities, gold reserves, antique collections, and securities, into a very strict trust," she said calmly. "That trust can only be accessed once one of 2 conditions is met." Helena held her breath. "First," Mrs. Hart continued, "you must reach the age of 40. Your father wanted you mature and wise before handling that level of wealth." Helena, now 32, clenched her fingers tightly. "And the second condition?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Mrs. Hart looked directly into her eyes. "The second condition is if both you, as the primary heir, and Lucas, as the secondary heir, are deceased." Helena covered her mouth. Victor knew about the second will. "His business has collapsed, Helena. He's buried in gambling debts and fraudulent investments. Loan sharks are after him. He's desperate." The cold, brutal logic finally became clear. He couldn't wait 8 more years. He needed the money now. Helena's chest tightened. "His plan," Mrs. Hart said, dissecting the situation like a legal case, "was to kill both of you in a tragic accident, a house fire. He would have a perfect alibi. As the grieving husband and father, the sole remaining heir, he would use your death certificates to challenge the trust in court. With both of you gone, he could claim everything." Helena sobbed silently. Her entire life, her love, her marriage, had been built on a lie designed to kill her. "He failed," Helena whispered. "We survived." "Yes," Mrs. Hart replied, "he failed because of Lucas, but he doesn't know that. To him, you're already ashes. He'll return soon, playing the role of the broken widower.
He'll arrange fake funerals and start processing the paperwork. Mrs. Hart closed the folder. He wants the documents from the steel safe, she said. He thinks the second will or asset records are there. She looked sharply at Helena. But Victor doesn't know one critical thing. Your father wasn't foolish. The inheritance isn't protected by paperwork alone. There's another key, a secret Victor doesn't know exists. And now it's our only weapon. Mrs. Hart's small apartment felt like a cocoon amid the storm. The outside world, the life Helena once knew, had collapsed, replaced by a terrifying new reality. She sat stiffly on the couch, holding a cup of cold tea. Lucas slept in her lap. Exhaustion weighed on her body and mind like lead. The man who had slept beside her for 9 years, the father of the child in her arms, had tried to burn them alive. Victor wasn't just greedy. Helena, Mrs. Hart's steady voice cut through the silence. She looked up. The elderly woman was reviewing a ledger beneath a dim desk lamp. He's desperate, Mrs. Hart said, and desperate people are far more dangerous than merely greedy. She flipped a page, revealing a list. I used my connections. Victor's gambling debts at illegal overseas casinos are massive. His investment schemes have stolen from clients. He's not just facing bankruptcy, he's facing prison, and the loan sharks hunting him don't hesitate to use violence. Helena swallowed hard. So this isn't just about my father's inheritance. Oh, the inheritance is his escape route, the only way he can pay everything at once and disappear. In his twisted mind, your deaths and Lucas's are the only solution. He's cornered. Helena closed her eyes as flames danced behind her eyelids. But how do we prove it? He has an alibi. He was in another city. Who would believe us? They'll think I'm traumatized, unstable. We won't prove it with words. We'll prove it with what Victor left behind. She closed the book and looked straight at Helena. Lucas said Victor ordered his men to retrieve something from the steel safe. Helena nodded. Yes, he told them to take the documents after the fire started. Suddenly she remembered. The safe, she said softly. My father installed it. Fireproof, explosion-proof. Whatever's inside survived. Exactly, Mrs. Hart said. Victor assumed it held property titles or the second will. He wanted to retrieve it to speed up his court claim. Helena shook her head. My father wouldn't be that careless. He never would have stored critical documents there. Victor even knows the combination, she added. Dad gave it to him back when he still trusted him. Mrs. Hart paused, processing this. He knows the combination, she murmured. Then why send someone else? To make it look like a robbery, or to keep his fingerprints off it. A soft voice interrupted them. Because it wasn't Grandpa's documents. They turned. Lucas was awake. He sat upright now, eyes sharp and focused. I know what Dad was looking for. Helena stroked his cheek. What was it, sweetheart? It wasn't Grandpa's documents, Lucas said. It was Dad's. Lucas took a breath. A few weeks ago, I woke up at night to get water. I heard Dad yelling in his office. He was furious, on the phone. He said, "Don't threaten me. Everything is written down. If I fall, you all fall with me." Helena froze. She remembered that night. She thought Victor was just stressed. After that, Lucas continued, he kept opening the safe. I saw him take out a small black notebook, a diary. He wrote in it. He looked scared. When he finished, he always locked it back inside the safe. A black notebook, Helena asked softly. Lucas nodded firmly. And this morning, at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, I heard him on the phone again. He said, "The plan is still on. Burn everything, but make sure you get the black notebook from the safe. That's my insurance. I need it. Destroy everything else, but that book must survive." Silence swallowed the room. Mrs. Hart whispered, almost in awe, "My God, this child!" She looked at Lucas with admiration. "Victor wasn't trying to steal assets," she said. "He was trying to retrieve or destroy evidence." "Insurance," Helena repeated. He didn't trust the arsonists, she realized. He kept records on them, his debts, names of loan sharks, maybe even details of the murder plot. "Exactly," Mrs. Hart said, eyes gleaming. "He stored the notebook in a fireproof safe, planned to retrieve it after the accident." "But the fire," Helena began. "They didn't get it. The fire trucks arrived too fast. They panicked and fled." They fell silent. The implications settled heavily between them. The suburban neighborhood was reduced to ashes, but the safe remained, and inside it lay a small black notebook, a book containing every filthy secret Victor had ever written down. What was meant to be his insurance had become a ticking bomb, and it was the only physical evidence capable of tying a man with a perfect alibi to an unspeakable crime.
"We have to get the book," Helena said. Her voice was steady now. Fear had been replaced by cold determination. "We have to take it before Victor realizes his plan failed and sends someone else to retrieve it." Mrs. Sylvia Hart nodded slowly, a thin smile forming on her lips. "He won't send anyone else, Helena," she said calmly. "He'll come back himself. He'll play his role, and he'll try to retrieve it personally. We need to get there first." Victor stepped out of the arrivals terminal at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. He had just landed in the city for his so-called business trip. His stride was confident, his expression composed. He glanced at his watch. 10:30 p.m. Perfect. Right on schedule. He had sent a message to Helena the moment his plane touched down. His alibi was now logged in airport systems and cellular records. All he had to do now was wait. Victor walked to a nearby cafe in the arrivals lobby and ordered a cup of black coffee. He took a seat at a corner table, his back to the crowd, facing a wall of television screens broadcasting news and flight schedules. He needed to look like a tired businessman taking a moment before heading to his hotel. He sipped the coffee. Bitter. His heart beat slightly faster than usual, but he controlled it. Adrenaline. That was all. Everything had been arranged. The professionals he hired, arsonists recommended by one of his loan sharks, had promised a clean job. A gas leak, faulty wiring, something tragic and accidental. They would enter after the fire grew large enough, retrieve the black diary from the fireproof safe using the combination he had provided. That book was his leverage. With it, he could control the loan sharks. Without it, he was prey. His phone lay silent on the table. No confirmation call yet. It should have come already. A flicker of unease crept in. They were supposed to call once the job was done and they were clear. Why hadn't they called? Victor stared at his phone. No signal. Then his eyes caught one of the TV screens. A local news channel. Breaking news. Victor's heart nearly stopped. The camera showed a massive blaze. Thick black smoke billowed into the sky. A caption scrolled across the bottom. Major fire engulfs luxury suburban neighborhood, Green Valley Estates. Green Valley Estates. That was his neighborhood. The camera shifted, shaking slightly, then zoomed in on the main gate. House number 17. His house. "No," he whispered. His coffee spilled from his trembling hand. The cup shattered on the floor. People turned to look. Victor didn't care. His eyes were glued to the screen. "At this time, the status of the occupants is unknown," the reporter said solemnly.
Victor began to shake. He grabbed his phone, dropped it, picked it up again with trembling fingers. He had to act. "Not now!" he shouted. He jumped to his feet. "My wife! My child! That's my house!" Gasps rippled through the cafe. Airport security rushed toward him. "Sir, please calm down. What's going on?" My house is on fire!" Victor cried hysterically, pointing at the screen. "My wife and son are inside. I have to go back. I have to go back now." It was the best performance of his life. A shattered husband, a grieving father, a businessman on a work trip who had just witnessed his family's tragedy from afar. His alibi grew stronger by the second. Security personnel tried to steady him as he sobbed. In the midst of his breakdown, Victor called the police in his hometown. "Please, House 17, Green Valley Estates. My wife Helena, my son Lucas, please save them." He immediately booked the first flight back home. Everything was recorded, logged, documented. Dawn broke over the ruins of Helena's home. Yellow police tape stretched across the charred gate of the suburban neighborhood. The air still reeked of smoke and chemicals. Firefighters continued spraying water onto smoldering debris. The fire investigation team had begun combing through the wreckage. Amid the chaos, a black sedan pulled up. Mrs. Sylvia Hart stepped out calmly. She wore a crisp professional suit and carried a leather briefcase. She walked straight toward the officer on duty. "Good morning. I'm Mrs. Sylvia Hart, legal counsel for the late Adrian Hart, the rightful owner of this property. I'm here representing the interests of the heirs." The officer frowned. "The heirs? You mean Mrs. Helena? We haven't been able to locate her yet." "I understand," she interrupted gently, her voice firm with authority. "And that's precisely why I'm here. There are legal and personal items stored in a fireproof safe in the study. Given the circumstances, I need to secure those documents immediately." Just then, a taxi screeched to a halt. Victor burst out. He looked wrecked, unshaven, pale, bloodshot eyes from a sleepless night. He ran straight through the police line. "Helena! Lucas! Where are they? Why won't anyone tell me anything?" Police officers restrained him. "Mr. Victor, please calm down. We're very sorry. The fire was severe. We haven't located any victims yet." Victor's heart dropped. Haven't located? They should have been in the bedroom. Their bodies should have been found. Had they escaped? Impossible. The fire spread too fast. Unless... He crushed the thought. Focus on the act. Victor collapsed onto the ground, pounding the pavement. "No, that's impossible. They have to be inside." While Victor staged his hysterics, Mrs. Sylvia Hart discreetly signaled the two men who arrived with her, professional safe technicians. They ignored Victor and headed straight for the remains of the study. "Ma'am, this is an active scene," an officer began. "Wait," Victor shouted. His panicked eyes locked on them, moving toward the safe. He jumped up, momentarily forgetting his performance. "What are you doing? Don't touch my property!" Mrs. Hart turned slowly to face Victor. Her expression was cold, unreadable. "Mr. Victor, I offer my condolences for your loss, but this safe belongs to the late Adrian Hart and is registered under the trust. I am here to secure its contents." Victor froze. He couldn't stop her. If he claimed ownership, he would look suspicious. If he tried to seize it, he would destroy his image as the grieving husband. He was trapped. All he could do was stand there, shaking with rage and panic. The technician began working on the soot-blackened safe. Heat still radiated from the metal. Victor prayed silently. Let the book be destroyed. Let the fire have been too hot. With a soft hiss, the safe door opened. Mrs. Hart stepped forward without hesitation. Wearing gloves, she reached into the dark interior. Victor's heart stopped. She pulled out a small dented metal box. She opened it. Inside, slightly damp from steam, but completely intact, lay a black, leather-bound diary. Mrs. Hart lifted it out. She didn't open it. She simply held it, then placed it securely into her briefcase. She closed the case, locked it. Then she turned and looked straight into Victor's eyes. Only a few seconds, but to Victor it felt like eternity. Her gaze said everything. Your game is over. In that moment, Victor understood. His plan had not just failed, it had reversed completely. The insurance meant to save him had become the evidence that would destroy him, and the book was now in the hands of the one person in the world he could not bribe, intimidate, or deceive. In the quiet of Mrs. Sylvia Hart's apartment, the only sound was the turning of pages. Dawn had arrived, but for Helena, the long night was far from over. Lucas slept deeply in the small bedroom, finally succumbing to exhaustion. Helena sat across from Mrs. Hart at the kitchen table, her eyes fixed on the black leather diary, now open beneath the lamp. Mrs. Hart had been reading it for the past hour. Her face remained calm, but her jaw was set tight. Finally, the elderly woman closed the diary slowly. The sound of the cover shutting echoed like a prison door slamming.
"This is worse than we thought," Mrs. Sylvia Hart said softly. Her voice was hoarse. She looked at Helena, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and cold anger. "This book is everything." Victor was meticulous. Dates, names, amounts. She tapped the open diary. The names of the loan sharks chasing him. The names of the 2 men who set your house on fire, along with the down payments he transferred to them. Helena held her breath. He wrote the plan down? Mrs. Hart nodded. "He didn't call it murder," she said. "He called it the final solution. He detailed his travel plans as an alibi, ticket booking dates, flight numbers, even draft text messages he sent you." Mrs. Hart pushed the diary away as if it were poisonous. "She also wrote about you." Helena stiffened. "He said you were naive, too trusting. He wrote that he couldn't wait for all of this to be over so he could start a new life with your father's inheritance." Her jaw tightened. "He even planned an overseas vacation after his mourning period was complete." Every word felt like a slap. Naive, too trusting. Helena had loved a man who thought she was a fool. A man who planned her death while smiling across the dinner table. Tears she thought were long gone flowed again, but this time they burned, not with grief, with rage. "We have proof," Helena said, her voice trembling. "We can go to the police now." "Yes," Mrs. Hart replied, "and this is very strong evidence. But Victor is clever. He'll hire the best attorneys. He'll claim the diary is fake or written under coercion. He'll drag this out for years. The loan sharks won't testify. The arsonists have vanished." The elderly woman leaned forward. "We don't just want him in prison, Helena. We want him broken. We want him to confess. We need him to catch him committing another crime, one he cannot deny." Across the city, in a luxury hotel room paid for with the last balance on his credit cards, Victor paced like a trapped animal. The grieving performance at the fire scene had gone well, but now a serious problem had emerged. The police had officially declared Helena and Lucas missing. No bodies had been found, no teeth, no bones, nothing in the debris that could confirm their deaths. Without death certificates, Victor couldn't access the life insurance. More importantly, he couldn't touch the trust. He couldn't prove to the court that both the primary and secondary heirs were dead. His phone buzzed, an unknown number. His heart dropped. Loan sharks? Or worse, the arsonists. He had failed to pay the remaining balance after they failed to retrieve the diary. He let the phone ring, then hurled it onto the bed. He was trapped. No money, no diary,
which he now believed was in Mrs. Sylvia Hart's hands, and Helena's. Helena and Lucas. He was now 100% certain they were alive, hiding with that old cunning woman, planning something. He needed money. He needed the inheritance before they could use it against him. He ran through every asset he knew. Only one remained. One thing Helena had always talked about, a personal keepsake from her father, a safe deposit box in an old bank downtown. Helena once said her father stored childhood mementos there. Victor had always suspected it was more than that. Asset lists, gold certificates. The box was registered under Helena's birth name, and the key, she used to wear it as a pendant hidden beneath her shawl. That key was surely melted into the rubble now. Useless. Or so he thought. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hart explained her plan to Helena. "Your father was a very careful man," she said. "He didn't just leave a will, he left a trail. The main inheritance isn't in one place. His assets are spread across dozens of safe deposit boxes in different banks under different aliases. To access them, we need two things: the original second will, which I have, and the list of every box location." "Where is the list?" Helena asked. "In the one safe deposit box Victor knows about, the box at Old Town National Bank. It's registered under your birth name. Your father knew you'd remember your childhood stories about that bank, but he also knew Victor was listening." She smiled faintly. "Your father set a trap. That box can only be opened with two physically identical keys. One he gave to you, the one you wore as a pendant, the other he gave to me. Victor doesn't know the second key exists." The plan began to take shape in Helena's mind. So, Mrs. Hart continued, "Victor is desperate. He knows about the box. He's convinced it's the gateway to the fortune. He'll do anything to open it. We just need to give him the opportunity." Mrs. Hart's plan was simple and brilliant. She had an informant, a low-level employee at an investment firm Victor owed money to, who himself was drowning in gambling debt. Mrs. Hart would use him as bait. The man, the informant, would contact Victor. He'd claim Helena hired him days earlier, that she looked terrified, desperate, on the run. Before disappearing, Helena had entrusted him with something, the only valuable item she managed to save from the fire, a key pendant. The informant, pretending to know nothing, would offer to sell the key to Victor. He just needed cash to pay off his own debts. 2 days later, Victor received the call. Now fully convinced Helena and Lucas had fled and would never return, he saw it as his only way out. He met the man in a crowded mall parking garage. He handed over the last cash he had for a small, worn key. A key identical to Helena's pendant. Victor clenched it tightly. He had won. Helena was foolish for trusting a stranger. Now he needed only one more thing. With Helena missing and soon to be declared a suicide driven by stress, Victor spent the night forging documents. A fake death certificate, purchased through his underworld connections, and a forged power of attorney supposedly signed by Helena before her disappearance. He was ready. Tomorrow he would claim his fortune. "He's taken the bait," Mrs. Hart told Helena that night. "Tomorrow morning at 10, he has an appointment with the branch manager at Old Town National Bank. He'll arrive with the key and the forged documents." "The bank manager will arrest him?" Helena asked. "The manager, Mr. Robert Klein, is an old friend of your father. He knows everything. The police will be there too, but they won't arrest him in the lobby." She looked Helena straight in the eye. Victor must be caught in the act. When he tries to open the box, Mr. Klein will escort him to the records room. And there, Mrs. Hart said calmly, his game will end. The air inside the vault room of Old Town National Bank was cold, heavy with the smell of old metal. Silent, so silent, Helena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She sat on a hard wooden chair inside a small private booth where clients usually inspected the contents of their deposit boxes. Lucas sat upright beside her, his small hand gripping hers tightly. He didn't look afraid, only intensely focused. In the corner stood Mrs. Hart, calm as a statue, alongside two plainclothes police officers who barely moved. They had arrived an hour earlier, entering through a staff-only entrance, escorted personally by Mr. Klein. Exactly 10 a.m., footsteps echoed down the marble corridor outside. Helena's heart dropped into her stomach. Victor. He was here. "This is truly a terrible tragedy, Mr. Victor." Mr. Klein's voice carried through the booth wall, filled with practiced sympathy. Victor's voice followed, hoarse, thick with manufactured grief. "Thank you, Mr. Klein. I just want to settle my wife's affairs as quickly as possible. It's too painful otherwise." Helena closed her eyes. How easily the lies flowed from his mouth. Of course," Mr. Klein replied. "You've brought the necessary documents and the key." "Everything is right here," Victor answered.
The sound of paper being unfolded echoed across the metal table. "This is her death certificate, and this is the power of attorney she signed several weeks before the incident. She told me she was under a lot of stress and wanted me to manage her finances in case anything happened." Helena almost choked. The lies were layered, meticulous, and cruel. She had never signed any document, not a single one. "Well, then, everything seems to be in order," Mr. Caldwell said calmly. "Allow me to escort you to the safety deposit box." Footsteps approached, passing right by the booth where Helena was hiding. Her heart pounded so violently she was afraid Victor might hear it. Lucas squeezed her hand tighter. The footsteps stopped just outside. A key slid into the lock. Click. "This is the bank's master key. Now, please, use your key, Mr. Victor." Helena heard metal scrape against metal. Click. The safety deposit box door opened. Victor must have been holding his breath, imagining stacks of gold or valuable certificates inside. "Well then, Mr. Victor," Mr. Caldwell continued, his voice still even, "according to our records, the late Mrs. Helena appointed a legal guardian to accompany anyone opening this box. This is standard procedure for heirs." Victor sounded confused. "Guardian? What guardian? I'm her husband, the primary heir. My son, he's gone too." "Ah," Mr. Caldwell replied, "this guardian was appointed by the late Mrs. Helena's father. It's merely a formality for verification purposes. Please step inside, Mr. Victor. He's already waiting." A knock came from the private booth in front of Helena. One of the plainclothes police officers opened the door from inside. Victor stood in the doorway, his eyes narrowed as they adjusted to the dimmer light. He looked thinner than a week ago. Dark circles ringed his eyes. Exhausted, tense, but there was still that glint of greed. He stepped inside, expecting to meet an elderly lawyer or a distant relative. Then he saw her. Across the table sat his wife, Helena, alive, breathing, staring at him with eyes no longer filled with love, but with cold, frozen hatred. She wore a light blue shawl, the one he had given her as a birthday gift. Beside her sat Lucas, the son he had tried to burn alive in his bedroom. Victor's face collapsed. This wasn't shock. This was pure horror, as if he had just seen a ghost. All the blood drained from his face, leaving him pale as a corpse. His lips parted, but no sound came out. He staggered backward, hands raised as if trying to ward off an apparition.
The silence inside the booth was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Then Lucas's small, clear voice shattered it. "Did you miss us, Dad?" Victor flinched. His gaze snapped to his son. Lucas stared back without blinking. Slowly, Helena raised her hand. In it, she held an object, not a key, but a black leather-bound diary. "Or were you looking for this?" Helena whispered. Realization slammed into Victor. A trap, all of it, a setup. The informant, the key, the bank. Instinct took over. He spun around, trying to bolt from the booth, from the vault room, but he couldn't move. Two plainclothes officers who had been standing silently in the corner now had iron grips on his arms. Mr. Caldwell stood in the doorway. His once sympathetic expression had turned cold. "Victor," Mrs. Sylvia Hart said, stepping out of the shadows, "your game is over." Victor didn't struggle. He sagged in the officer's hold, staring at Helena one last time, his eyes filled with disbelief and total defeat. He hadn't been beaten by the police. He hadn't been beaten by Mrs. Hart. He'd been defeated by the wife he thought he was naive and by his quiet little son. The interrogation room at the police station felt cold and sterile. The walls were painted a dull white, and the only furniture was a heavy metal table and 3 chairs. Victor sat in one of them, now dressed in a faded orange prison uniform. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with restrained fury. He no longer looked like a grieving husband. He looked like a gambler who had just lost everything on his final bet. Nearly an hour of silence in isolation had given him time to rebuild his defenses. The grieving act was useless now. This time he would play the victim. The door opened. Victor looked up. Not 1 or 2 detectives entered, but Mrs. Sylvia Hart, accompanied by Mr. Caldwell from the bank, and a hard-faced senior detective named Detective Barnes. Victor exploded. "This is a setup. You all set me up," he shouted at Mrs. Hart. "This old woman has been after my father-in-law's inheritance for years. She brainwashed my wife. Helena is unstable. She must have conspired with this woman to run away and frame me." His words spilled fast, desperate but coated in false confidence. "I know nothing about that fire. I was out of town. I have an alibi. Hundreds of people saw me at Chicago O'Hare Airport. Hundreds saw me hysterical when the news broke." Detective Barnes was unimpressed. He sat across from Victor, placed a thin folder on the table, and opened it slowly. "Let's stop the theatrics, Mr. Victor," Barnes said in a low, heavy voice. "Let's start with something simple." He pulled out a document. "The forged power of attorney you submitted to the bank. Our experts have confirmed the signature is an excellent forgery, but a forgery nonetheless." Victor scoffed. "Helena gave it to me. She said she was stressed. She's lying now." "Very well," Barnes replied calmly. "Then there's the forged death certificate, commissioned through a syndicate operating out of Old Town Chicago. We've arrested the forger. He's ready to testify that you placed the order." Victor stiffened, but held his ground. "I panicked. I thought they were dead. I couldn't think straight." "You panicked again," continued Barnes, "when you met an informant named Darius in a mall parking garage 2 days ago. You purchased a key from him, a key you claimed was entrusted to you by Helena." Victor fell silent. He hadn't known they'd tracked the informant. "Helena told me to," Victor shouted, his voice cracked. "She wanted money to run away. She sold me the key. She framed me." Victor now looked like a cornered rat, squealing in every direction. "You have nothing," he yelled. "Just the words of my unstable wife against mine. I have an alibi." Mrs. Sylvia Hart finally spoke. Her calm voice cut through the tension. "An alibi is a powerful thing, Victor, only if no one knows what you did before you went to the airport." Victor glared at her. "Shut up, you old woman." She ignored him and placed something on the table, something that silenced him instantly. The black, leather-bound diary. "We didn't expect you to be so thorough," Mrs. Hart said. "Names, dates, dollar amounts, the 2 arsonists you hired, your plan to retrieve this diary after the fire. It's all in here." Victor's eyes locked onto the diary. His face twitched, but he'd try again. "That's not mine. I don't know what that is. You planted it in the safe. You framed me." Detective Barnes shook his head slowly. "This diary, Mr. Victor, is just the bonus, the cherry on top. We don't even need it to convict you." Victor laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. "Nonsense! You have nothing. You've lost." "Maybe we have nothing else," Mrs. Hart said softly, "but your son does." Victor froze. "Lucas? What do you mean?" Detective Barnes signaled. Another officer entered, carrying a laptop and a small projector. The device hummed as it cast light onto the dull white wall. "A few weeks ago," Barnes said, "your son, Lucas, bought a toy, a spy toy, a small camera that can record. Kids love things like that." Victor began to tremble. He remembered. Lucas showing off a small robot toy. He thought it was harmless. "Lucas grew suspicious of you, Victor," Mrs. Hart said gently. "He said his father was always yelling on the phone, so he placed the toy on the bookcase in your home office, facing your desk. He just wanted to know why his dad was so sad."
Detective Barnes pressed the play button. The footage was shaky and low resolution, filmed from the angle of a toy shelf, but Victor was clearly visible, sitting at his desk, speaking on the phone. The date and timestamp glowed in the corner of the screen. 2 days before the fire. The audio was crystal clear. "The plan stays the same," Victor's voice echoed through the interrogation room. "No changes. I'll be at Chicago O'Hare International Airport when it happens. My alibi is solid. Burn everything. The apartment, Lucas's bedroom, the master bedroom. Make it look like an accident." He paused. "But make sure you take the black diary from the safe. That's my insurance. I need that book." Victor stopped breathing. His face was no longer pale. It was as white as the wall behind him. Detective Barnes didn't stop. He played another clip. This one was from the day before. Victor was speaking to 2 men whose backs faced the camera. "I don't care how you do it," Victor said in the video. "Make sure they're asleep, gas, drugs, whatever. I don't want resistance. Once Helena and Lucas are taken care of, I'll transfer the rest of the payment. The inheritance will clear in a few weeks. We'll all be rich." The laptop snapped shut. The projector went dark. The room fell silent. Nothing more needed to be said. The airport alibi shattered into pieces. The recording wasn't just evidence, it was a confession made before the crime. Victor stared down at the table. His shoulders sagged. The mask was gone. His defenses collapsed. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Slowly, he lifted his head and looked at Mrs. Sylvia Hart with hollow, defeated eyes. "I was cornered. Those loan sharks, they threatened Lucas. They threatened Helena." One last lie, one final attempt to paint himself as the victim. I did it to protect them." Mrs. Hart looked at him coldly. "You did this to protect yourself, Victor. You sacrificed them to save your own skin." Victor finally broke. He lowered his head onto the table. His body shook with dry sobs, violent, airless, without tears. "I had no choice. I had no choice," he muttered again and again. In the adjacent room, behind a one-way mirror, Helena stood frozen. She held Lucas tightly against her chest, covering his ears so he wouldn't hear his father's confession. But Helena heard everything, every word. She watched the man she once loved, the man she had vowed to stand by for life, collapse into a pathetic figure who had been willing to sacrifice his family for money. There was no love left, no sorrow, only a deep, piercing cold,
and overwhelming relief. It was over. The chain that bound Helena to Victor had been broken forever. Victor's trial moved quickly and became headline news across the country. The story of a polished businessman husband, a supposedly naive wife who survived, and a quiet little boy who became the key witness captured national attention. The courtroom was always packed, but Helena and Lucas never attended. Represented by Mrs. Sylvia Hart of Hart & Associates Law Office, they were shielded from the media circus. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The black diary, the forged documents, testimony from the bank manager, and above all, the star exhibit, the video recordings from Lucas's toy camera. Victor's attorneys argued that the footage was illegal, that Victor had been framed, that he had acted under extreme pressure from debt. None of it mattered. The day of sentencing arrived. Victor, now gaunt and visibly aged, stood before the judge. His face was empty. The judge delivered the verdict in a firm voice, calling Victor's actions a profound betrayal of family and of humanity itself. Victor was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to commit murder, attempted double homicide, arson, and document forgery. Sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As Victor was led out of the courtroom for the last time, camera flashes blinded his face. He no longer looked like a successful businessman. He was just a defeated criminal. Victor's karma didn't end there. Inside prison, he was nobody. He had no money to buy protection. News of his confession, detailing the names of loan sharks and hired arsonists recorded in his diary, had leaked. He had broken the criminal code. The loan sharks he betrayed had powerful connections behind bars. As Mrs. Hart anticipated, Victor's life turned into a living hell. He lost his freedom, his family, his wealth. He was left with nothing but regret and fear of the next day. Several weeks after the verdict, Helena and Mrs. Hart returned to the bank vault, this time carrying a valid court order and Mrs. Hart's original key. They opened the safety deposit box under Helena's name. Inside were no gold bars, no jewelry, but a letter from her father and a small notebook. The letter contained Adrian Hart's words of love, explaining why he had hidden the inheritance. "I only wanted you to find your own happiness, my daughter, not happiness bought with money." The notebook was the key. Inside was a list of more than a dozen other banks, aliases, and safety deposit box numbers scattered across the country. It was a treasure map left by her father. It took Mrs. Hart months to liquidate everything legally. The inheritance was far greater than Helena had ever imagined, wealth enough to support her and Lucas for 100 generations. But the money felt heavy in her hands. It was money that nearly cost them their lives. Helena made her decision. She sold every remaining asset that had ever been connected to Victor. The proceeds were donated to orphanages. She refused to touch a single dollar of that tainted money. She would use only the clean inheritance left by her father. A year passed. Children's laughter filled a green, sunlit park. This wasn't a luxury estate. It was a modest, warm new home on the edge of the city, far from painful memories. Helena sat on the porch, wearing a bright-colored shawl, stirring a cup of jasmine tea. She looked peaceful. The tension lines on her face had faded. Lucas, now 8, ran through the yard chasing butterflies. He was still in therapy, but the nightmares had lessened. He talked more now. He smiled more. Helena didn't just sit quietly on her wealth. In downtown Chicago, a new building had opened. Its sign read, "The Hart Legacy Foundation." Guided by Mrs. Hart, Helena used her father's money to establish a foundation with two main missions. First, providing full scholarships to intelligent, perceptive children from underprivileged families, like Lucas. Second, offering free legal aid and safe houses for women and children trapped in abusive or manipulative relationships. Helena transformed an inheritance that nearly cost them their lives into a force that saved others. That was her good karma. Lucas ran up to her, holding a small bunch of white daisies. "For you, Mom," he said with a wide smile. Helena took the flowers, her heart warming. "Thank you, sweetheart." Lucas hugged her tightly. "Thank you for believing in me, Mom." Helena returned the embrace, kissing the top of his head. Those words, once spoken in fear at the airport, were now spoken in peace. "No," Helena whispered. "Thank you. You're my hero. You saved us." They sat together on the porch, watching their garden glow in the late afternoon sun. Victor's shadow was gone. The fire had burned out. What remained was a new dawn, a safe future, and the unbreakable love between a mother and her son, tested by fire and emerging victorious.